2 weeks. Can it really double its price in 2 weeks? What about Bitcoin, though? Even though today Bitcoin was pulled down slightly due to the market being in deep red, right? Is it possible that Bitcoin can go on a tremendous run in the next 2 weeks and go to 40,000+? Okay. Well, I got my idea from Plan B. Plan B tweeted this saying 22K to 40K in 14 days, not impossible. Why is it not impossible? Because we saw it before. We've seen this before. This is not theoretical. Between December 24th of 2020 and January 7th of 2021, we saw Bitcoin go from 22,000 to 40,400. So yes, we've seen it before, not just even percentage-wise. We actually saw Bitcoin go from 20,000 to 40,000 in mere 14 days. Okay, are we going to see the same thing right now? Well, let me make a case for it. We have a lot of charts that show when you go on a tremendous downturn, when you find that bottom, right, and you actually start reversing, what happens, right? You can see clearly going all the way back to 2014. Every time Bitcoin is stuck under a major trend line, right, usually during crypto winter, right, what happens afterwards? You have a tremendous upside that follows as soon as you break that trend line. And did we just do that? Yes, we did. We went on a, 13-month downtrend. And we finally broke through it, right? So look at all the times that this happened before. You have a nearly 6,000% pump. And then you had a smaller one of 211%. Then you had a 380% one, right? So can we see 100%? All we need is 100% to get to 40,000. Can we see that? Well, if history is on our side, then yes, we could definitely see it. There's definitely a lot of people stacking sats right now, and the whales are stacking more and more and more and more. And as you have demand go up and supply go down, which it does, well, that's when more gains come. And it's starting to happen already, right? And for this year, so far, it's early. It's only been 23 days. Bitcoin has had the biggest return of anything out there, right? Everything else is still in the negatives or barely up by 8%. Bitcoin is up a staggering 30%. Good stuff. Good stuff, right? President Bukele took out, or actually borrowed a whole bunch of money by issuing bonds, right? About $800 million because they wanted to get involved with Bitcoin. Before, El Salvador would be very dependent on the IMF and the World Bank, right? But they decided to do things differently. They wanted to break the chains. They wanted to attain financial freedom, so to speak, for an entire country, right? So ever since El Salvador made this move, it's been controversy one after another. People obviously picking on the president and his decision after Bitcoin came down, right? And there was a lot of talk about how they're in dire trouble, that they can't pay back their bonds, right? Well, President Bukele today answered that, no, I did pay it back. You know what? I paid it back with interest, but here's the thing. People don't want to cover it. Media does not want to cover the story because the media is driven to drive this narrative that Bitcoin is bad and how FUD, right? Basically FUD dominates the views. So no one's talking about how this was a non-event, right? And President Bukele continues forward. He continues to believe in Bitcoin, right? Recently, their lawmakers passed or voted for the volcano bonds, right? Which basically allows miners miners in El Salvador to basically mine with free energy, with volcanic energy, right? And they want to sell bonds to kind of grow this. Not only grow this, but also just grow El Salvador and get them off the reliance of the IMF and the World Bank, right? So they're still moving forward. And plus, of course, they hold a ton of Bitcoin. They hold a ton of Bitcoin and they continue to buy more, right? But who's this one entity? Who doesn't like this, right? I think it's obvious. The IMF. The IMF is basically one gigantic bank, and they like to keep countries, they like to control countries, basically, right? They loan out a whole bunch of money to countries that are really struggling, and you got them, right? You got them hooked. So when El Salvador started getting involved with Bitcoin, started buying Bitcoin, started issuing bonds, right? Talking about volcano bonds, IMF, World Bank both hated it. Even El Salvador, they're asking for IMF for advice, maybe to even help them embrace Bitcoin as legal tender and also putting Bitcoin on a balance sheet. Of course, IMF said, no, right? Too much financial risk, really? Or is it because they just don't want to lose grasp of these countries, right? So we're definitely seeing global adoption, and El Salvador's paved the way. Right now, Fiji's new pro-Bitcoin Prime Minister is thinking about making Bitcoin legal tender, right? So it's already started. It started. The second country that embraced Bitcoin as legal tender, Central African Republic, right? They have already done it, and now they're trying to embrace crypto even more, coming out with more favorable crypto bills and regulations to allow crypto to thrive, right? And of course, you have bigger countries like Brazil that's already legalized Bitcoin as payment for merchants. But recently, Brazil and Argentina are both thinking about creating some kind of new digital currency. Could be CBDC, but many people are thinking and suggesting, hey, why do that? Why not just embrace Bitcoin, right? And maybe that's a possibility. So we're starting to see global adoption already around the world. It's not just the US and Europe and Asia, right? The big countries that we know, but a lot of countries that suffer a lot more than we do with either hyperinflation or financial instability, right? Or they're just way too dependent on the IMF and World Bank. They're utilizing Bitcoin for the same reasons we are as retail investors, trying to break free and attain financial freedom, right? So this is fantastic. I've covered a lot of news about U.S. states now fully embracing Bitcoin. We have countries doing so. The adoption is growing by leaps and bounds. But of course, there will be people or entities in this case, or specifically banks. Banks do not want to see Bitcoin thrive because they are threatened by it. All the shenanigans that banks pull, if you learn about money, you learn about how the financial system works, you realize it's just one gigantic Ponzi scheme that will one day collapse. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will. And that's why they want to keep things going. They don't want people to opt out and break out. So, wanted to start with that. I think it's awesome to see so many countries and El Salvador still continue to stay strong despite the market turn, right? Despite coming down. It's a hard decision to make, right? Especially, you're the first country to do so, but it's awesome that we're seeing more and more. Good, strong economic data is causing the market to go up. Well, you would think it should, right? But that's because people are no longer afraid of Powell. That could be a mistake, maybe premature, but we will see next week. Because over 99% chance right now, at least this is what according to economists, what they're predicting, that the next rate hike will only be 25 basis points. Not 50, not 75, 25. Because inflation is heading lower. So now we're getting to a point where we're no longer afraid of Powell. And good economic data is actually just good economic data. just shows that the U.S. market is strong and we're not falling into a deeper recession. That's the fear for 2023. So many predicted that in 2023, the economy was just going to get much worse because maybe Powell and the Fed went a little bit too far. Well, the numbers are still strong. GDP is still strong. You would figure the GDP number for Q4 should be weak, but actually blew through expectations. So that's good, right? So next week we can, after hearing what Powell says, and if he does the 25 basis point rate hike, and he's like, okay, that's enough. I don't think we need to do any more. I mean, just watch out. Next Thursday, we could see an explosion that we haven't seen in a very, very long time, right? So there's that. Also, earnings. American Airlines posted record revenue. People are still flying, getting around. Comcast beats expectation, even though people are cutting the cord, right? I mean, left and right, all good news. Tesla recorded some fantastic news with their earnings. They beat revenue, they beat profits, and look at it. They're up almost 11% today, right? So today is not a good day to be a bear. Not one bit. Today is an all-around good day. Everything is heading higher. I've been talking about the debt ceiling, right? And it's just really, I don't know, it's so irresponsible, right? To think that as a nation, we have this debt ceiling because we overspend every single year, and we think it's okay to overspend. And whenever we hit this limit, you could think of it like a credit card limit. Somehow when we hit it, rather than try to solve the problem, what we do is ask to increase the limit. And that's the situation we're in right now. We have hit this debt ceiling that we already up by $2 trillion just a year ago, and we have hit that limit once again. So now there's talks about, let's just get rid of the ceiling altogether. Why do we need to go through this every year, right? When we know that we overspend, so let's just eliminate the ceiling altogether and have endless borrowing and endless spending. Now that's the hot topic. I mean, it's like going to a restaurant, going to a nice fancy restaurant. You sit down, you order food, and when it's time to pay, you're like, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't bring any money with me. Can you just put it on my tab? Most likely they'll say no, but let's say they did. And then you come back again and say, well, I can't afford it. Let's put it on my tab. And let's put it on my tab again. How many times do you think you could do that before they cut you off and they kick you out, right? I mean, we're kind of trying to push the limits here. Let's just eliminate the debt ceiling and just keep accumulating more and more trillions, and let's see what happens. It's kind of like rolling the dice. Let's see how long we get away with it. It's utterly ridiculous. And why I mentioned this is because this is why Bitcoin was created. When Satoshi created Bitcoin in 2009, it wasn't like this. Not nearly this bad. After we had to bail out the banks, right? Satoshi, whoever he or she or group, said, no, we don't want to trust the Federal Reserve anymore. We don't want it to be dependent on the central banks around the world. They don't know what they're doing. They could just bail insolvent banks. They could bail out anyone they want at any time, right? Why would we want to trust a system like that? And now you fast forward 13 years later, we're talking about just endless printing now. Endless borrowing, endless printing. Like, just think about it for a second, right? This is how bad it's become. And somehow it's the norm. Somehow it's just like, okay, why not? Why not? We could get away with it. Why don't we just do it, right? Another reason why we all need to be in Bitcoin. Something that can't be artificially inflated, something that has a set supply, right? And you can't just keep IOUing, right? Keep borrowing money and printing more money until it inflates to nothing, right? So another bullish case, another reason why we need to opt out and we need to invest in hard assets that won't be manipulated and controlled and inflated by the governments around the world.